Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Deserts of Plenty. My name is Ralph, and this podcast is about, trying to make our way in this crazy, mixed up world, in a world where we are inundated with calories, but devoid of nutrition, inundated with information, but devoid of knowledge, and awash in experiences, but devoid of connection. It's an odd time to be alive. And I'm bad with names. I forget the guy that was talking about this. But he was sort of referencing because at the every people that have ever lived always thinks, well, this is the end times, right? There have been doomsday cults since there have been people, and certainly if you look at history, you can think. If you lived in northern China in the 14th century, and every time the Mongols came, you're like, oh yeah, this is the end of the world. And for a lot of those people, it was the end of their world. Or if you lived in Europe in the 14th century, and the Black Death is killing one of every two people. But even now it feels like, oh, I always have this feeling like, oh, this is, this really feels like something, we're building towards some kind of big catastrophe. But then I remind myself, well, every culture has always felt that way from basically the beginning of time. But there's a fella, and I forget his name. I apologize. I should have Googled it, but it just struck me to think about it, to talk about it now. And he said, okay, so assuming that human beings have existed for 250,000 years, which is, yeah, could be 100,000 to 250,000, whatever. But he picked 250,000 years, the history of human beings, since our ancestors became recognized as modern humans. And he said, if you had a 1,000-page book, so every page of that book represented 250 years. For the first 990 or so pages, not much happens, right? There's still living in, or I guess it would be up until about, maybe 5,000 years ago. So what's that, 20 pages? I'm not doing the math in my head very quickly. But yeah, like 20 pages. So up until like page 980, basically nothing happens. I mean, nothing new. It's the same stuff. They're hunter-gatherers. They're living in, on the plains in Africa. They start to go out. So some things are happening, but it's slow. So basically the last page 1000 that we are living in today started around, 1750, 1760. And almost everything that you see around you has been invented or has been made or has been improved in this last 250 years. And even this last paragraph, which would represent the last 50 years, 30, 40, 50 years, the amount of change that is happening, it really does feel like, if you were an alien reading this book, you'd be pretty bored till about page 980. And if you kept going, oh, it starts to pick up. Now it's picking up. And you get to the last page, you're like, oh my God, what is going to happen? So I think about that a lot. And it's true, right? It's like, oh, this last page has been quite the revelation. A lot going on. Pretty hard to pack all that into just a few paragraphs. Anyway, yeah, I think that is good because that really kind of encompasses the way I feel about things. That it's there's so much going on. It's another thing that I was reading. This guy I know, Yuval Noah Harari, his book, one of his books. I've read a couple of his books now. Homo Sapiens, I haven't read, but I've read Homo Deus, which I really enjoyed. And now I'm reading 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And this is in his book. And he says, like, there's just so much going on in the world. No person understands everything that's going on in the world, or has an understanding. People may have understandings of their own fields, but to know what's going on in this whole world it's just too much. And additionally, our hunter-gatherer brains, which, to go back to the, 250,000 years, the 1,000-page book, our brains were designed for page 500 or 600 or 700 or 800 or 900. They're not designed for this. And so we have to rely on systems that were made to keep us alive in the savannah to navigate the world as it appears now. And it's just seemingly an impossible task. And everybody's doing the best they can. But so I'm very forgiving of people, because we're all just trying to make sense out of what seems nonsensical. Anyway, this brings me to what I wanted to chat about today. Because I had an odd experience, but not unprecedented. It's an odd experience, but it happens now with great regularity. I was at my theater, the SoCap, and I was chatting with a friend of mine, and we were just, catching up. And she said, "Oh, I went and saw, this movie that I'll just call X." And I was intrigued because at that point I hadn't seen it, and I was just curious what her thoughts were, since this is a recent movie that's come out, and it's generated a lot of conversation for a variety of reasons. And the interesting thing was, before she told me her thoughts, she did a check. She looked over her right and her left shoulder to make sure nobody was listening. And I was just like, wait a minute. You had to do a check to see if anybody overheard your opinion about a movie. No, I didn't say it out loud, but in my brain, I said that. And then she went on to tell me what she thought of the movie. Now, what the movie is, I don't want to say what the movie is, because it's like everything now. It's so political that if I mention it, I'll be either a hero or a villain to many people just by mentioning the name of the movie, regardless of what I thought of it or what anybody else thought of it. So I won't mention the movie because it doesn't matter. It could have been anything. It could have been any movie. But the fact that this person had to do a check and look to make sure nobody was listening, I was absolutely, well, two things happened at once. Oh, yeah, I get it. I think I might actually do the same thing, or I might lower my voice to make sure nobody overheard my opinion of a movie. And so I struck, of course, and then also, like, that's what is going on. That seems so far and above what, I even struggle to talk about it. Like, who is there anybody that would think that's a desirable situation? That we've become so political and so tribal that I'm not even talking about religion or politics or, feminism or, anything that's like a hot button issue or a topic that is fraught. Trans rights. There's another one, racism. That are fraught with a lot of emotion. It's just the opinion of a movie. But that movie, or all movies now, pretty much everything is so tied up and caught up in politics that they're linked and you cannot separate them. And that's the future, it seems to me, like, where depending on what tribe you're in, you will be told, oh, this movie is acceptable, that one is not. You must like this one, that one you don't. And even if you go and you don't like a certain movie, you've got to pretend that you do in order to get on with the tribe. And we're all willingly and voluntarily doing this. And it just strikes me as incredibly odd because, again, it's just a movie. And I recalled, if you know me, you probably know I am not a fan of the Abrams movies, anything he's done, really. I think he's great at coming up with premises, and Lost, the first season of Lost is great. And the first, I guess, 2/3 of Westworld, I adore. But, for me, he just doesn't pull it off. But I'm very critical of his Star Wars movies. And again, the reasons are immaterial. But I thought they were bad movies, poorly constructed, and yeah, I guess the reasons are a bit immaterial because I just think they're bad movies. I think there's, and again, without going into too much detail, because it's not the amount of detail isn't relevant, but the point is I know why I don't like these movies, and it has nothing to do with Luke's character not fulfilling what I thought it should be, or not liking a diverse cast. In fact, I like the casting. The actor that plays Ren, I'm a fan of, and I like all the actors and all the casting. I thought was great. It's just I don't think it's a good story. Um, and just it makes errors that I don't think a first year screenwriter would make, like a novice screenwriter would make these mistakes. But when I would express this opinion on social media, and this goes back to whenever that came out, I guess in the mid 2010s, I was told repeatedly by people that, oh, these are not the reasons you don't like this movie. Here are the real reasons you don't like it. And so people were dictating to me why I didn't like the movie. And the subtext was to label me with certain undesirable traits. And at first I thought it was funny. And then I didn't think it was so funny. And now I too am very careful about what I write about. And again, not about hot button or hot topics. There's an old saying, like, don't talk about, religion or politics. It's not even about that. It's about what I thought of a certain movie. I feel like I can't even do that in any kind of way without people presupposing my politics or what I think about certain things or whose side I'm on or anything. And that's just that. So how are we ever supposed to have conversations about real divisive issues? There's another quote that I like a lot about, when it comes to divisive issues, we're either talking or we're fighting. And that's violence. So there's two ways to me out of this deadlock, or I guess I wouldn't say deadlock yet, but it seems like it's getting there, where, already, like, it's in the States, I'm not sure if it's true of Canada, but in the States, the number one predictor of the person someone will marry is, are they of the same political class as you? Like, Democrats marry Democrats, Republicans marry Republicans, and neither the twain shall meet. And I think that's sad, honestly. I really enjoy having conversations with people, like good people with whom I disagree. I've learned so much. And from talking to people with whom I disagree, in a respectful way. Of course, there are jerks on both sides, even if we're talking just a dichotomy. And there's not a dichotomy. There's centrists and all kinds of different types of people. But I enjoy talking with people, to people with whom I disagree. And I have friends and family members and acquaintances on all sides of the political spectrum. And because I listen to people and talk to them and I don't judge, people tell me. And it's very interesting to me to see and learn who is right wing, especially where I live. I live in downtown Toronto, and I'm in the arts community. That's a pretty liberal place. And there are quite a lot of libertarians and conservatives. And if any of you are hearing this, I totally understand why you have to go deep underground. Some of you, many of you. In fact, I'm not sure I know of a conservative improviser who's living out as a conservative. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Anyway, To me, it's just, is that the future we want? Where before you give an opinion about something as mundane as a movie, you have to check around and make sure no one's listening or the wrong people are listening. And then also, like, do we really have to tell people why they don't like a movie? Is it really all come down to politics? The only reason you don't like X is because you're this, or the only reason you do like that is because you're that. I don't like that, honestly, and I'm not going to play by those rules. I, for now, will keep a lot of opinions to myself, but I'm not sure for how much longer. It's one friend of mine during a conversation about this, and I said, I don't know how much longer I can stop talking. I cannot talk about this stuff or shut up about it. And they said to me, you own a comedy club. And I was like, yeah, exactly. I own a club. So I have to be very careful about what I say. Because even something innocuous like, oh, I really like that movie. Because everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people will build straw men around that. The same way that happened when I said, oh, I don't like the Abrams Star Wars movies. Oh, well, that's because you're X. Like, no, I'm not. Whoa, 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 whoa. So, yes. So even me saying, at some point, I'm going to open my mouth, I think, because the way the world is going, or the way my community is going, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of having to check to see who's listening before I give an opinion on something as innocuous as a movie. I'm just not happy about that. And I think as things always heighten, what will that be like in 5 years? Oh, do you like chocolate or vanilla? I'd really rather not say because, team vanilla. Oh, right. Because all it takes is like, you know, one person who's placed as one of the thought leaders on one side or the other to come out in support of one of those over the other. And then everybody will run. We already know this is true. If somebody who's a thought leader on the right said, well, I think only people on the right should eat chocolate, we know there's a huge number of people on the left who would go and eat vanilla and become Team Vanilla and proudly walk around with a shirt saying, we're Team Vanilla. Because, well, my question always comes back to, what is it we really want to do? Whether you're on the right or the left and you're talking to, well, now we're not talking at people on the other side. What is it you really want? Do you want to show them a way to change their minds and see your way of thinking? Or do you just want to scream at people? Because where I sit, it seems like it's the latter. That all we want to do is yell at people. And I know from when I participated on these boards, political boards, I would get into these fights with people, and this is like 20 years ago. During the nascence of online political boards, I would get into violent words, altercations with people, and I would fume and I get so upset and I write them back and then in the middle of one, if that person disappeared, I'd go check again and again and again. Where'd they go? The only thing worse for me than not having someone agree with me was that they weren't around or yelling back at me. So I didn't participate in that encounter, that engagement of screaming at somebody. So, yeah, that's it. If that's what you like, that's cool, I guess. I don't want that. I want to be able to give opinions free and clear. Me personally, I don't care what anybody thinks. I care what people do. I care about their intentions, but not about their thoughts. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thanks so much, everybody. Hope you have a good week. Please, if you have any comments, questions, whatever, send me a note at ralph@socap.ca. That's SOCAP as in Peter.ca. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Bye.